Paulie Malignaggi for Paulie TV here. We're going to go into some stuff. Actually, look at this. I still got my mask that they made me wear on the airplane. Let me take this thing off right now. Hold on. It's on my neck. Let me take it off. See this? See, on the airplanes, we still got these rules, so I had it around my neck because I just flew into here, and now we can put it away. All right, guys. So today's episode on Paulie TV, we're gonna get into the hardest punches I took. Everybody has a lot of misconceptions about what a punch feels like. It's funny. When you first meet, I think a lot of boxers probably go through this. I don't know. I know I've answered a bunch of these questions, or at least gotten a bunch of these questions, ridiculous questions. And I know people don't mean harm by them, so I don't really get offended. I think some people get more mad about them. Like when they say, like, doesn't it hurt? Of course, getting punched doesn't tickle. It does hurt, but what I mean by hurt would be probably, when you lose consciousness or when you feel like you're stepping in potholes, when that kind of hurt. Every punch doesn't tickle in terms of every single punch. If it hits you, like, that stung, that hurt, But when we talk about hurt in fighting terms, we talk about hurt like, when it's, you're basically losing consciousness. You feel like you're going, something's wrong, something goes wrong, you're wobbled, you're hurt. So you get those moments. If you box for long enough, you're going to feel that at certain points. There's guys who have never been knocked out badly, but even if you haven't been knocked out badly, you've had moments where you've been hurt, and then, like I said, the term hurt by fighting terms means rocked, wobbled, and all that other stuff where you're trying to get your senses back together. Sometimes you're still trying to be in the fight and you're trying to get your senses back together. So for me, obviously I had this curiosity as well, and people always used to ask me when I first started boxing, when I first started sparring, does it feel like, And I'm like, I don't know, man. I had been in fights before I boxed anyway, like, getting in trouble in the street and whatnot in school. But, of course, in boxing now, you're starting to do it several times a week. You're sparring on a regular basis, and you're going to compete. You're going to compete as a fighter as well as an amateur boxer. And, when you start amateur boxing, at least when I was there in the amateurs, you fought with 10-ounce gloves. So the gloves got smaller, the headgears were thinner, and, you competed, and you felt some of the shots worse. But and then, obviously as a pro, you obviously go into even smaller gloves, more aerodynamic gloves. They're even more damaging because professional boxing is made for damage. People pay to watch damage. People pay to watch guys get hurt. So, you're going to be able to do more damage, but you're also going to be taking more damage, And, of course, you lose the headgear as well. So that causes clashes of heads. It causes cuts. It causes a lot of other things that maybe weren't as commonplace in the amateurs. So it takes me, I was going to go into this with you guys, the hardest punches I took. So, obviously the hardest puncher I ever fought is Miguel Cotto. I've gone into this. I'm sure people have, discussed this and have heard me say this plenty of times, that Miguel Cotto is the hardest puncher I ever fought. But the most hurt I ever was as in my whole boxing career, amateur or pros, was actually in the amateurs. I got stopped one time in the amateurs, and it was it's the only time that I ever actually felt like a separation from consciousness, like completely for a couple of seconds, In the end, I actually wound up beating the count, but the referee stopped the fight while I was on the ground. But in those moments, where it's the only time I can really describe it as like what you see in like a Rocky movie, where Rocky's imagining like he's going down slowly. That was the only time I've been hurt you guys have seen it. I've been hurt in the pros. I've been down in the pros. I've been even really rocked badly in the pros. But it was never to the point of like losing a sense of where I was for a second, I know some guys get a sense of losing a sense of where they were for a while, But basically this fight, in the amateurs, I had a guy named Darling Jimenez who was my rival. And he was a big phenom in the New York area. He was probably the guy that everybody in the New York metro area was looking at to be the next star to excel in professional boxing when he turned pro. every generation, especially in New York, we have our guys that we kind of look at as like, okay, this guy's got a lot of potential to go places, to become a star as a professional boxer. And some guys fall off and some guys don't. But obviously, every generation, every quadrennial, because every quadrennial is, an Olympic year. You get guys that turn pro, and then you get a new set of guys coming up from the JOs, coming up from the juniors, and they're looking at these guys as the stars. And I remember my generation had some pretty good fighters. I had myself, had Luis Collazo, even Yuri Foreman came and moved from Belarus to New York, and he was competing a lot in the New York amateur area, and also did very well. And he also ended up becoming a world champion later on. But the phenom of my generation was Darling Jimenez. Was also Shamir Reyes, actually. He was in the JOs, but he turned pro when he won the national JO title. So Shamir Reyes actually never fought as a senior in the men's division. And now in the men's division, when I was an amateur, it was 16 and a half and older. And Shamir Reyes was a guy who, a southpaw kid. He was trained in my gym. I actually used to spar him when I first started. He used to actually beat my ass. He was a southpaw. I was just learning to spar. I was learning the boxing in general. And Shamir had just won a national JO title. But Don King was heavily after Shamir. And Shamir, instead of staying in the amateurs and fighting men in the amateurs, which looking back now, at the time I had no clue how important that was. But for me now, looking back now, I feel like it's important that you start to fight your first grown men as an amateur and not as a pro. Like, I don't feel like a kid who has a lot of success in the JOs should go directly pro from the JO success. And Shamir did that. I haven't seen too many guys have a successful pro career from having done that. But Shamir was a good fighter, and the thing is, he signed with Don King, and Don King, by that point, still had a big reputation, but by that point also had lost a lot of dates and was getting less and less TV dates and less and less influence over the sport of professional boxing. Make a long story short, Shamir turned pro. Otherwise, he would have been competing in the Golden Gloves when I got there, because I didn't have an amateur career in the JOs. I started boxing late. I started boxing at 16, but by the time I had my first amateur fight, I was 17 years old. So I got thrust into this circle of people, and I had a lot of catching up to do. I won a novice New York Golden Gloves right away, but then I'm in the open division where now I've got to fight these guys. And, the guys in my weight class were both Shamir Reyes and Darling Jimenez, who were both looked at as, future phenoms. I guess I was sort of fortunate that Shamir ended up turning pro, and I didn't have to deal with him in the New York Golden Gloves. But Jimenez still remained, and so I had to deal with him, and he was in my weight class, as was Shamir, but Shamir turned pro. So, make a long story short on Shamir's situation, he signed with Don King, and Don ended up kind of using him up. I know Shamir got beat by a guy named William Abelian, I remember, and then Antonio Cermeño, who actually was an ex-world champion by that point, or he became a world champion after, I don't know. Cermeño actually wound up getting killed in Venezuela. He got kidnapped by some rebels or whatnot, and they want the ransom money. That's rest in peace, Antonio Cermeño, who was a good fighter, but he stopped Shamir as well. And so that kind of, King didn't really get Shamir to where I felt like Shamir had the potential to go to. But Darling remained in the amateurs. And so I started competing, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about, this kid Jimenez, and I've got to kind of get through him, because now I've won the novice division, and now I got to go to the open, and he's the guy in the open division in my weight class. And literally, it started becoming a regular thing where I was really becoming a prodigy, where I was excelling really fast. I was getting better and better every tournament I was doing. But the problem was, in New York, I was running into Darling in all the finals. And Darling had a lot of experience. Darling probably, I don't know for sure, but I think the first time I fought Darling, he probably had over 60, 70 amateur fights. And I went into the fight with about 8 amateur fights. And this is the fight where I got stopped. Also, you'll notice in this fight, I was front foot heavy. I had actually pulled my calf muscle a few weeks before playing football at the park. And so I fought in this tournament. I fought the semifinals of this tournament with kind of a strained calf muscle, and then I fought the finals of this tournament with a strained calf muscle. I won in the semifinals, and then in the finals, you notice when I'm fighting Jimenez in this video, if you watch the video, it's on YouTube, where I'm kind of front foot heavy, and I never fight on the front foot even back then. But I had to kind of fight on the front foot because I couldn't put the weight on my back foot. And I think that also kind of limited my movement, because I was very awkward. At that time, I was still learning a lot, but I had a lot of athleticism, so I could confuse you. Darling was more set in his style. He was, he was the guy that everybody was looking to become the phenom in professional boxing. He was the guy that, in the New York generation really, really looked at New York Metro, the heads of the New York Metro boxing area really looked at Darling as a favorite. And it was frustrating for me because I wanted to be so badly to look at that way. But of course, I felt like every time I was getting in the ring with him, I felt like there were people that were already just considering me lost even before I got in there. I have actually press clippings from New York Golden Glove finals that I fought him in, even going into the finals and going into the tournament finals, where people are talking about him like he's a phenom before we even fight the fights, So I remember being really, really frustrated, but it was also very, very motivating. But anyway, this fight here where I get stopped, and this is one of the hardest punches I ever took, maybe the hardest single punch I ever took, because it's the only punch that ever separated from me from my consciousness, even for the few seconds that it did. And it's the finals of the New York Metros tournament in late 1998. It's my 8th or 9th amateur fight. And the fight is a 5 2-minute rounds. At that time, we used to fight 5 2-minute rounds in the open division, which now they've gone back to the 3-3s. They used to change it all the time in the amateurs. They couldn't get their stuff together. But this is I think the last round. We were only like 20 seconds from the end, and what he does is he feints me. He feints me with a right hand, and I kind of pull back. You shouldn't pull back square on the ropes. You shouldn't pull back with your chin up on the ropes. Again, I'm making a lot of mistakes. I was very athletic here, but I was not experienced enough to not make all the mistakes yet. So he gets me. I'm pulling back, and he fakes me with the right hand, and then he throws a quick left hook right hand, and I'm looking hook so much because his reputation was always for a big hook, and the hook right hand was basically a setup, a decoy hook, and he hits me with a big right hand, and I go down, and you can check it out here. As you see, I'm hurt. I'm rolling over. And the referee stops it right away here. But as you can see, I end up beating the count. Here's my frustration with the referee. I'm trying to get him off me. My frustration with the referee there was that I will tell you, man, for that second, I went down like I felt like I was in a cloud. Like I went down like I didn't know for a second what I was. It's the only time it felt like in the Rocky movie when Rocky's going down really slow. The only time in my whole boxing career that I got hit with a punch and I felt like that. So as you can see, I went down like I'm out cold before I hit the ground. I went down stiff. And when I hit the ground, I guess it woke me up because I'm telling myself, oh man, I'm down. I got to get up. And so what do you do when you're down and laying down? You roll over to get up, right? You're on your back, you roll over, you get on all fours and you get up, right? So I went to roll over too quickly to try to get up, and I was still in a haze. And so when I went to roll over, I was like, oh my God, like what is this? What am I feeling, And I just put my head back down into my gloves, but now I'm on my stomach. And when the referee saw that, he stopped the fight instantly. I guess it's the amateurs, they take precautions. I was pissed because at that point, I looked down into my gloves, I looked up, and then I was finally good. When I put my head in my gloves, like to try to clear my head, and it all happens in a few seconds, as you guys can see. But when I do look up again, when my head comes out of my gloves, I'm good, and I just get up. I have no idea that he has stopped the fight when I rolled over. If you watch the whole thing, I'm kind of pissed about the stoppage. I'm angry and so on and so forth. It was an experience. At that time, I was kind of embarrassed that I had gotten stopped that way. I knew that it was the fight that everybody wanted to see because they wanted to see if the prodigy level success that I had in just a few amateur fights thus far could transcend against a guy who would really, really, was really, really established at that point and the New York metro area. The heads of the New York metro area boxing, USA boxing panels, they looked at this guy like he was a future world champion. They looked at him like he was the guy to look at. And to be honest, me and Jimenez wound up fighting a bunch of finals in the amateurs. He beat me 5 out of 6 times. But in reality, I was getting better every single time out. I had gotten a late start, and I felt like I won the last 3, but I only got 1 decision. We fought 3 times at 125 pounds. That was the first time. And then when I moved up, coincidentally, he moved up. So we wound up fighting. We wound up catching each other in all the finals of the 132-pound division as well in New York. So we would just constantly be in the finals against one another in every single New York tournament. The frustrating thing was that I couldn't get a decision against him. First, I couldn't beat him at all. He was really beating me. And then as we move up to, I didn't feel like I lost any of the fights I fought him at 132 pounds. I felt like, the 125 pounds, I was still gaining experience, but he beat me. I felt like at 132, I felt like I won all 3 fights. But nonetheless, They were solid experiences. I tell people today, without Donald Jimenez, there is no Paulie Malignaggi, because he gave me a reason to go back to the gym and try to excel and try to get better and better and better, knowing that I was going to see him in every tournament. Because in the amateurs, it's just about tournaments. It's just about, you got to try to win as many tournaments as you can so you build up your resume and people want to sign you. And it was frustrating because in order to get to the nationals, I had to win a New York tournament to represent New York at the Nationals, and I couldn't get by him. So he was going to all the Nationals, and I felt like really frustrated that I couldn't get that national experience. I remember I went to the 99 National PAL tournament where you can get sponsored to go, and I remember I got sponsored to go. And I went there, and I was like, okay, finally going to get to go to the Nationals. And I think Darling was there too, and we didn't run into each other. But who do I draw my first fight? I finally get to go to the Nationals. Who do I draw my first fight at the Nationals? Rock Allen. Rock Allen is Nazim Richardson's son. Nazim Richardson, as you guys know, was worked with Hopkins. He's the guy that found the plaster of Paris and Margarito's hand wraps. He's a solid trainer, and he had twin sons, Rock and Tiger Allen. They were terrific. As a matter of fact, Tiger Allen had lost the national JO finals to Shamir Reyes a few years earlier. So the Allen twins were unbelievable, and they were Nazim Richardson's sons. And I draw this guy that my first fight at the National PAL tournament in '99, and I was so aggravated. And I'm fine, because I was looking forward to being at the Nationals and saying, now these guys are going to wait till these guys get a load of me. I couldn't get by Darling, but now I'm going to show these guys at the Nationals what I can do. I draw Rock Allen. I lose a 3-2 split decision in a fight that in a fight that I felt like I won. I recently, I think I found this fight. I might be posting it to the Paulie TV page as well. It's my 99 PL tournament final with Rock Allen. Rock ended up, I think, winning the tournament or going to losing in the finals, and but it qualified him for the Olympic trials, which were going on early the next year. Either way, again, frustrating, but I'm learning. The amateurs, I still really abide by the amateurs, and I feel like a fighter needs the amateur experience, or especially a high-level amateur experience, in order to get better and better. I got a late start. I knew I had a lot of catching up to do, but I never shied away, because in the amateurs, it's not like the pros where you have to build up a record, and if you don't build up the right record, you're never going to get your shot. In the amateurs, it doesn't matter. You just enter as many tournaments as you can. You fight as many fights as you can. You don't duck anybody, and it doesn't matter if you don't duck anybody. It doesn't matter if you take an L, really. It just matters how many tournaments you win, how many important big tournaments you can win. At the end of the day, that's what matters. A lot of these guys with padded amateur records or big amateur records, a lot of them were able to do that when they were JOs and they were fighting other kids. And when you're fighting kids, you can overwhelm them, and you can kind of beat them just by overwhelming them. But as a man, when you hit a grown man in the mouth, he's going to want to hit you back. So you got to actually fight your way to success in the men's divisions and the amateurs. So I wasn't, I got thrust into this right away. I didn't have a JO career, so I had to fight all these guys right away. But you know what? It was an important part of my maturing process and getting these guys. Darling, I ended up fighting a bunch of times in the finals of a bunch of tournaments. I beat him one time, and then we had the New York Golden Glove finals. I remember in 2000. I think these fights are on YouTube. All of them are on YouTube. I think the '99 New York Golden Glove finals was 125 pounds. I lost to him then, and then I had the New York Golden Glove finals with him in 2000 when I had just beaten him a few months earlier in a finals of another tournament. And I felt like I won this fight. They went to a split decision, and they gave it to him. But we were fighting on a computer scoring system that night, I remember. And they said, I was told that somebody pulled the plug, or somebody stepped on the plug and pulled the plug on the computer scoring system. So they had to go to the backup paper judges, and they gave him a split. I mean, I thought it was total bullshit, which I'll probably always think it was. But nonetheless, I think that they knew Darling was about to turn pro, so they wanted to send him away with a good sending off as another Golden Gloves title. But again, either way, when I look back on it, frustrating as it was, without this kid, I wouldn't have become the fighter I became. As a matter of fact, when Darling ended up going pro, that's it. Now I became the guy in the amateurs in New York. I became the man at that weight class, so they knew I had always been fighting him in the finals. And I ended up getting to represent New York at the Nationals. And I won everything. I won the U.S. championships as well. I won every New York tournament that year. And I won the New York U.S. championships as well. I reached the semifinals of the National PAL tournament where I lost to Vicente Escobedo, who would later go on to become a 2004 U.S. Olympian. But I mean, I became very, very dominant in that year after Darling turned pro, and it really showed me. That's when I started realizing all the hard work that I'd put in just because of Darling, just because of the fact that he was motivating me constantly just wanting to get better and better. Now I had gotten so good, and I was continuing to excel, that now with him not around, I was just mowing through the whole weight class, and I was mowing through the weight. Even at the nationals, I won the U.S. championships and became the #1 ranked lightweight in the United States and the amateurs in my weight class. So it was an important maturing process. But basically, the moral of the story is this: that's the hardest punch I ever took, and the moral of the story is, that's when you have your failures. That's when you have to most get yourself back up and dust yourself off and use those failures as motivation. That's the most important thing. They say you fall off a horse or you fall off a motorcycle, you got to get right back on the bike, or you got to get right back on the horse right away. Otherwise, you're never going to do it again. It's sort of like that with boxing. I've seen a lot of guys take bad L's in the amateurs. A lot of kids that I was in the amateurs with, teenagers, good fighters. They took bad L's, or they even got robbed when they were so frustrated. I never saw them again in the gym. Good fighters, good little fighters. And I feel like that it applies that you have to be at your most motivated when you're feeling at your most down. Your motivation actually the being down actually has to be what the trigger is to motivate you the most. And I always use that in boxing. Any problems I had in my life in boxing, I always kind of just took it out back in the gym. And it's I would just focus on the gym, and I would just kind of leave my problems outside the gym. If I had issues outside the gym or had issues outside of boxing that would bother me, or even issues in boxing, I would just meditate and focus on my boxing skills improving and getting better and better and better. And I feel like sometimes athletes actually do better in these situations. Sometimes they get distracted, sometimes they don't. It's funny. I was watching the Diego Armando Maradona, the former soccer superstar documentary in the last couple of days. It's all in Spanish. If you haven't watched it, it's pretty good. And it was showing like his best year was like the 86-87 year, right? And he played for Napoli and he won the Serie A title with Napoli. And the summer before in 86, he won the World Cup as well. And he went to the World Cup having impregnated 2 women at the same time. He had his wife pregnant and had one of his side chicks pregnant. And, it was, months after the World Cup, the other chick ended up having a son, and then his wife had a daughter a few months later. But what I'm saying is, I realized in that moment when he left for the World Cup in the summer of 86, he actually left with 2 women pregnant, knowing he had this problem at home. You know what I mean? Like, now I'm not saying that, it's a good problem, or I'm not excusing any of it. What I'm saying is the way he was able to compartmentalize everything. And then obviously both babies were born in the months after. And yet in those months, he won the World Cup in the summer. Argentina won the 1986 World Cup in Mexico, and he was the star of the team. And then the 86-87 soccer season, he gave Napoli their first ever Italian championship. In the months during those months that those babies were all born. You know what I'm saying? He ended up having a phenomenal year as a whole. So I'm just using that as an example that there are things that you can take as negativity, and you can take them as distractions, or you can take them as something that will break your spirit and make you stop trying, or break your motivation. You can use it as, you can say it's that, and then you can make that excuse and say, oh, if that hadn't happened, I would have been able to motivate myself. Or you can do the opposite, which is, I got these problems. Screw this, man. I'm going to overcome this problem just by distracting myself in my own success. Because if I'm successful, it's going to be able to solve all of this. It's going to be able to overcome any of this, because people will sort of start to view you differently. Your public perception changes. The public perception of you changes when you're successful. And suddenly, your success allows you to overcome certain problems that you thought you might have had, or you thought that they were problems that you could never overcome, and sometimes that applies even with the problems within boxing. I felt like it was very, very important when I took that knockout loss to Darling Jimenez to get right back on. And I did. I got right back in. I entered the New York Golden Gloves a few months later, and I got myself back to the finals of the New York Golden Gloves, and I fought Darling again, and I lost again. I lost on points, but I legitimately lost again. A few months later, I went to the Empire State Games, reached the finals. Oh no, actually, I think I caught Darling in the semis of that tournament, and lost again to Darling. Lost again. Now I moved to 132 pounds. Later, and I entered the New York Metro tournament, 132 pounds. And I'm thinking, okay, Darling's at 125. Now I'm gonna steamroll this weight class. Nope. Guess who shows up at 132 pounds signing up for the tournament? Darling Jimenez. So guess what happens? Me and Darling reach our finals against each other again. And Darling beats me again. But this was a fight that I thought I won. I thought I won this fight. And then we ended up fighting it was called the Eastern Box Off. It was to get us qualified for the Eastern Olympic trials. And I beat him in the finals of that tournament in the Eastern Box Off in New York. And then we ended up fighting in the New York Golden Gloves a few months later, and that's the one where I told you I felt like I won, but they somebody pulled the plug. And there's 2 days of New York finals in New York Golden Gloves. It's a Thursday night and a Friday night. It's a women's and men's finals. And I got to say, that in 2000, the most anticipated final of the New York Golden Gloves was me versus Darling. I mean, at that point, we were both ranked in the top 5 in the nation, actually. I was ranked 4 and he was ranked 2. So we got 2 top 5 national fighters fighting in the finals of the New York tournament. Everybody's looking forward to this fight. And then, and they told me somebody pulled the plug. And of all fights in that fight, of all finals in that fight, I know. But anyway, I remember just wanting to being so pissed off. It's funny because Darling turned pro after that, and they sent me to the National Golden Gloves. I got to the quarters. I won 2 fights. I got to the quarters. I lost to Urbano and Tion, also in a 3-2 split decision. I lost a bunch of split decisions in the amateurs, but Urbano, it was close. It could have went either way. Funny thing about Urbano, he actually had a decent pro career. He ended up fighting for a world title against Brandon Rios. He got knocked out against Brandon Rios, but he reached the level of fighting for a world title. Urbano ended up winning the National Golden Gloves. He ended up advancing to the semis and the finals and winning them. But his toughest fight of that tournament was against me. It's just we ended up having, he won a split against me, but we ended up having our head-to-head matchup in the quarters. So I knew already, like I was getting there. I kind of knew already I was getting there. And it's funny because I initially said to myself, I'm going to turn pro in 2000 after the Olympics, whether I make it or not. But when I was starting to compete at the Nationals in 2000, I said, you know what, I need another year. And you know what? That was the smartest decision I could have made, because that one year I won everything. I got my confidence up. I became U.S. champion. I won another New York Golden Glove title, and I won everything else in New York. And then I also became a national champion. And then it kind of catapulted me into my pro career. The hardest puncher I ever fought, though, winds up becoming Miguel Cotto. I mean, the consistency of his punching power was unbelievable. I went into the fight watching his knockouts and thinking to myself, man, you know what? These look vicious. I'm going to probably get hit harder in this fight than I've ever been hit in my life. But I'm going to put that in my mind. I'm going to keep burying that into my mind the whole training camp, that I'm going to get hit harder this fight than I've ever been hit in my life. And sometimes I would try to overcompensate opponents. Like I remember when I fought Lovemore and Doe, I remember told myself, because he was like a major stalker. He gave everybody hellacious problems stalking him with tons of pressure. And I remember telling myself, I'm going to be under the most stress, the most pressure I've ever been under in my life. And I overcompensated. I ended up beating him easily. I ended up handling the pressure very easily. So sometimes I overcompensated, and it helped me mentally. So I was kind of hoping the year before with Cotto, when I was saying I was going to get hit so hard in my mind, I was kind of hoping I was overcompensating. But the first shot he hit me with, I was like, nah, this guy hits just as hard as I feared he would, and it was, was he a major puncher at 140 pounds. And even at 147, I thought he was a pretty big puncher, but considering what he did to the 147 pounders. But either way, the shot he knocked me down with broke my orbital bone. We've gone into that before. The consistency of his punching power was really, really sick. His jab was like a ramrod. You know what I mean? I mean, his jab was like harder than some people's right hands that I've taken. Like some people's right crosses or left crosses that I've taken. Just his jab. I mean, obviously he was a converted southpaw. He was a natural lefty, but the heaviness of his jab was sick. And so it didn't surprise me when over the course of his career I saw him drop 2 guys with that jab. He dropped Alfonso Gomez with a jab, and he dropped Joshua Clottey with a jab. And it didn't shock me. Like, that's how heavy this guy's jab was. And I was like, you know what? And it's funny because I was watching both fights with people that I knew, and they were like, you drop him with a jab. I'm like, bro, this guy's jab is a different level. I'm telling you, this guy's jab is like a boulder hitting your face. Like you really, really, it's not an average jab. And so I didn't feel so bad when I saw those guys going down from the jab, because I can remember just being really uncomfortable with the heaviness of his jab and being like, oh my God, even this guy's jab, it's so heavy, But he was probably the hardest overall puncher, consistent puncher that I ever fought. The most concussed I probably was in my professional career it's probably the Sean Porter fight. I got hit with a bunch of rabbit punches, though, I gotta be honest, so it's kind of like a little bit iffy there, but I nonetheless I took it was really bad. I had to go to the hospital. I had really post-concussion syndromes for months after that fight, so that was pretty bad. But I never actually lost the sense of where I was. You see, like with the Jimenez knockout in the amateurs, the Jimenez knockout in the amateurs, I told you, I kind of lost. I'm kind of just felt like I was floating when I was hurt, and I was just badly hurt and down. With Porter, I never not knew where I was, but it was just like thudding shots, and they just hurt bad. And I don't know if it was the fouls. I haven't watched that fight back a lot, because I just didn't want to revisit that when it happened. But I didn't feel the referee took very much control of that fight. He kind of just let it happen. But either way, by the end of the fight, I was really concussed really badly. I had to go to the hospital. I was thrown up, and I had a lot of post-concussion symptoms after that fight. One interesting fight, which is random, and this could have actually changed my whole career. And I got hurt really badly in this fight, and people will never realize how badly I got hurt. I was fighting Chris Fernandez, probably the best single shot I took in my whole professional boxing career in terms of it almost ended a fight in one shot. Was Chris Fernandez randomly, and a fight that I won almost every single round. I'm fighting an 8-rounder after the Ricky Hatton fight, and I needed like a comeback win. So Chris Fernandez is not a great record. He's kind of a journeyman kind of guy, but a decent fighter. Capable. And, never had a really key win in his career. Fought guys like Devin Alexander and got stopped and all this other stuff. Just a run-of-the-mill guy. But we were needed to fight a run-of-the-mill guy in order to get ourselves back on the horse and get back on the winning ways after the Ricky Hatton fight. And I'm dominating this guy. And I've gotten with Sharif Yunan, who was a trainer. He was a kind of a slick kind of style trainer, which is I kind of wanted to get back on a trainer like that because I had gotten away from that with Buddy McGirt, and I felt like it was going away from. I felt like I had gone away from what got me there to begin with, which was a speed flash style. So I changed trainers after the Hatton fight, and I went to Sharif Yunan, who was a speed flash guy, and I said, I got to get back. And I remember my trainers asking me, you just went from a former trainer of the year to a guy that a lot of people know, and a lot of people that I knew were telling me that. But I was like, you know what? I listened to everybody else the last time, and it didn't go well. So I think that I need to go with a guy who kind of I feel is conducive to my style. And Yunan was very conducive to my style. As a matter of fact, he's got a son named Junior Yunan who's an undefeated prospect right now. Check him out. He's pretty dangerous himself, and I think can do some damage in the professional boxing game. He's about 16 or 17-0 now. But Junior Yunan's father, Sharif, was Junior. By the way, I know since he's a kid, he grew up in the gym. But Sharif was a speed flash guy, and so we were going back working on all that speed flash stuff. All the stuff that had made me who I was, and was naturally conducive to my athletic style. And so we get our first fight together with Fernandez. It was a kind of a comeback win we needed that after the Hatton fight, so that we can be positioned to get back into big fights. Because now we've been fighting big fights for a couple of years. I fought Cotto in 2006. I lost the Hatton in 2008. This is early 2009. And I get in there. I remember it was on the Carl Froch versus Jermaine Taylor on the card. And this fight was Froch and Taylor. First of all, was one of the best fights you'll watch. If you haven't watched that, that's a sick fight. But I was on the off TV portion of the card, and I was fighting and they put it like on a separate Broadway boxing event where it was on local TV in New York. And I fought Chris Fernandez, and I'm pretty much dominating the fight. I'm fighting this flash speed style, and I'm dominating the fight with Chris Fernandez. At the end of the 6th round, I ended up taking a good shot. See, as you can see some of the highlights here, I'm doing all the flash stuff that I had been lacking for the past year. I wanted to just go back, have fun in there, be myself, and and do well. And at the very end of the 6th round, I hear the 10-second tap. When boxers know what the 10-second tap, it's that. When the warning that 10 seconds left in the round. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to bounce around here in the corner, and the bell's going to ring, and I'm going to get out. And he fakes a left hook, and I kind of make an athletic move at the end of the round where he fakes a left hook, and I kind of go to ride with the hook. I kind of roll towards my left. And when I do that, here it is. Is this right here? Look, right there. He actually fakes the hook, and he hits me with a right hand instead. That hurts me. So now I'm trying to hold him, and he hits me with a follow-up uppercut and hook because I couldn't hold him tight enough. And there I'm hurt as badly as I'm going to be, bro. Right there, I'm hurt as badly as I'm going to be. I don't think people realize how, if this was mid-round, I'm telling you, I would have got knocked out. That's how badly he hurt me. I could not believe it. And you see, I'm just messing around. I hear the 10-second tap. I'm making a miss. I'm making a miss all night, really. And I'm just trying to get back into my athletic style ways, trying to get back into a normal rhythm style. See, right there. That right hand hits me. Why did I bend that way towards the right hand? Because he faked with the hook right before that. And instead of blocking or making a reasonable fundamental move on a left hook, which even if I would have bid on it, wouldn't have got me hit with that right hand, I tried to make an athletic move. And I with my hands down, I tried to ride with the hook. Where basically I thought it was coming from this direction. So I was going to ride with it and make it miss. And the bell was going to ring, and that was it because I had already heard that 10-second tap. Instead, what ends up happening, he fakes and he throws the right hand, and I bend right into the right hand, and it hurts me. It hurts me so bad that when I go to hold him, I don't hold him tight enough, and he follows up with an uppercut hook and really blasts me. Look how I fall on the ropes here. Look, I actually fall against the ropes here. I would have went down. This shot would have dropped me down. Look, if the ropes aren't there, I go down right there. You know, so then I just spear him because I'm so hurt that I'm just. I said I gotta hold him at all costs. I make my way back to the corner, and I'm winning the fight easily. But now I'm like, yo, I'm hurt bad. And I remember the whole minute going by. There's my cut man, Danny Milano, in the ring in the corner now. He's trying to pull my hair, wake me up. Best cut man in boxing, by the way, Danny Milano. Excellent. I had him my whole career. Excellent cut man. So I go back to my corner, and the minute passes. And I'm telling myself, like, oh my God, like I'm still hurt. I never again felt like I did when I got hit with Jimenez, where for a couple of seconds I actually didn't know where I was. With every other time I've been hurt in my career, I've known that I'm hurt, and just like I'm just got to get myself together. I'm getting up off the stool and like I'm still hurt. Can you believe I'm still hurt? I just went through a whole minute. I'm still hurt right now. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of boxing him from the outside, I'm going to try to go chest to chest and just try to catch and shoot, try to roll. Again, try to beat him athletically, but not take too many chances. I boxed him on the outside. I boxed him a little bit on the inside. I figured on the inside I would box him. He couldn't get leverage on his shots if I could smother him and then kind of just touch him up with some inside boxing. Another ironic thing, there's 2 in between rounds. This was an 8-rounder. So that means I came back again another round. I came back at the end of the 7th round in the corner. I did not even realize I came back again to the corner. When I watched this fight on video, when I got the video a few weeks later, I watched this fight and I said, oh my God, I made 2 more trips to the corner. I don't even remember the second trip I made to the corner. I don't remember going back to the corner between the 7th and 8th round. I don't remember any of that at all. I remember getting hurt, the belt saving me, going back, starting the next round still hurt. And I remembered thinking I just fought the last round and that was it. Instead, I actually fought the 7th, went back to my corner, listened to a minute of instructions, went back out for the 8th, and fought the 8th round too. I don't remember between the 7th and 8th round at all. I don't remember at all. And I did a post-fight interview. I don't remember the post-fight interview until I saw it on video. And then I went back to the dressing room, and I remember I wanted to, take a shower and go watch the main event because it was, Frock and Jermaine Taylor was going to be a great fight, and it ended up wound up becoming just as good as it was hyped. But the co-feature was Alan Green against Carlos De Leon Jr. Carlos De Leon, people the old historians may remember him. He was a cruiserweight world champion who lost his title to Evander Holyfield in the 80s. De Leon Jr., his son, was a pretty good fighter, and he was fighting Alan Green, who was a solid prospect at the time. And I remember being in the shower, and there was a TV in the dressing room, and I'm kind of in the shower. I hear my team watching the fight, and I'm just kind of showering, washing my hair, I remember. And all of a sudden, I hear my team oh! And I put my head out the shower. I peek my head out the shower, like, yo, what happened? And De Leon had just been dropped by Alan Green. And I remember everything after that moment. It's like that was the moment that I woke up. It was like up until that moment, I'm in a haze. I don't remember walking back to the dressing room. I don't remember walking to doing the post-fight interview. I don't remember even jumping in the shower. I just remember being in the shower, shampooing my hair, and my team is saying, oh, and then there's a TV screen inside the dressing room. So I peek my head out the shower because, there's a curtain. And I just peek my head out the shower like, yo, what happened? And they're like, oh, De Leon just got dropped. And so I finished my shower. I went downstairs, and that was it. We went to watch the main event. I remember everything after that. But it's funny because from that punch at the end of the 6th round all the way to that moment, everything is a blur, man. It's crazy. And I had never felt that before to that extent, that for that long of a period of time. But Junior Jones, I used to spar Junior Jones, the ex-bantamweight and super featherweight world champion. He had some good wins in his career. He beat Marco Antonio Barrera. He gave Marco Antonio Barrera his first 2 losses of his career, actually. He beat Orlando Canizales as well. Junior was a good fighter, but he would randomly lose to guys he wasn't supposed to lose to, just randomly. But he'd also beat guys he wasn't supposed to beat. He was a very good fighter. I used to spar him in New York. And I remember Junior told me when he won his first world title against Jorge Lecer Julio at bantamweight, the WBA bantamweight title. Junior, by the way, was a massive bantamweight. He was my height, but he fought at 118 at the beginning of his career. He was massive, broad shoulders, big right-handed puncher. And when I was first starting out, I was a 125-pounder in the amateurs, so we could spar a lot. We did a lot of sparring. And I remember Junior telling me about when he won his first world title. He said, I got dropped in the 2nd round. I don't remember the rest of the fight. I just fought it on instinct, and I won the fight on points. And I remember thinking like, yo, how do you just fight 10 rounds and don't remember the fight? That's crazy, bro. That's crazy. And sure enough, in my little experience there with Chris Fernandez, it was unfortunately I'm not able to brag that it happened in a big title fight or anything. But it's crazy because I'll tell you what, if this shot I take happens middle of a round, I probably get knocked out. Look, I'm so hurt I couldn't even hold him tight. As you can saw, he was able to follow up with an uppercut and a left hook. So while he hit me with that right hand, I thought I was holding him tight. I was not even holding him tight enough. And he hit me with the follow-up uppercut left hook that made me sit my ass on the rope and then made me spear him. And then luckily the bell rang after that. But if there is like half a round left, I probably don't get out of that round. That's what's crazy. And if I don't get out of that round after just having lost to Ricky Hatton and looking like dog poop, like right, dog poo poo, to not curse, a few months before in the Ricky Hatton loss. And if I get knocked out by Chris Fernandez right after that, I am done. That's it. My career is done. People are never going to view me the same way again. People are going to think, oh, I'm shot, I'm ruined. And I would never, ever, ever get another title and another big shot again. It's crazy how you need a little bit of luck as well. So my luck was that it was right at the end of the round in a fight that I was easily winning, mind you. I mean, I was easily dominating and I was just trying to have fun. I was trying to get back to doing the things that I had gotten me as so far in my career as they had gotten me. And, my luck was that it happened at the end of a round. I wound up beating him. And my next fight, I wound up getting what? Which fight was my next fight? The Juan Diaz fight in Houston, the one everybody knows about where I went crazy in the post-fight interview. And look how sharp I was. But you would have never seen that if Chris Fernandez lands that punch in the middle of the round. That's what's crazy. So boxing, combat sports in general are crazy because any punch can do anything at any given point, at any given time. You know, it can change trajectories of careers. And sometimes I see guys, they get caught, and you get caught maybe at the wrong time of the round, and then you get yourself knocked out, you know? And it's crazy because you see certain guys that don't come back from certain things. They're not given opportunities or they lost their own confidence. And I feel like that could have happened to me, you know, especially at that moment in time where I had just looked really badly losing to Ricky Hatton. If I lose to Chris Fernandez and get knocked out by him, even if I was winning the whole fight prior to that, I'm telling you, people would have never, ever viewed me the same way again. I would have never, ever gotten the shots I got. Instead, what happened? I ended up going into the Juan Diaz fights, fighting 2 Juan Diaz fights, fighting Amir Khan the next year, losing. But a few years later, I wound up winning a welterweight world title. So I ended up becoming a world champion even after this. But I don't think any of it would have happened if Chris Fernandez would have hit me with that right hand in the middle of a round instead of the end of a round, you know? So those are the kind of the biggest shots I took in my career. There were other moments where, you know, I felt shots. I think Herman Ngujo hit me with a good right hand in one of the rounds and kind of stung me a little bit. But as far as what I remember, the biggest punches I took in my career, you know, I kind of just went over all of them. And, you know, people are always curious about these things. They're always curious about, you know, what does it feel like? Not every punch feels like this. Most punches don't feel like this. And rarely in sparring. I've never really been hurt in sparring, you know, like because the gloves are too big, too heavy to be hurt in sparring. I've been dropped in sparring. I actually dropped guys in sparring. But really, you do feel guys' heavy-handedness in sparring, but it's not heavy-handedness enough to where you're going to get stopped unless you want to get stopped. I mean, don't get me wrong. You do see certain guys get knocked out in sparring. It never happened like that to me. And even when I had guys down in sparring, it never was like, oh, okay, like he got hurt really badly. You know, it's... Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. I was sparring a kid named Edgar Santana, and getting ready for my rematch with Paul Delgado. Delgado was a kid who was actually very crafty. He wound up fighting for a world championship later in his career. He was a very crafty guy, but never really got treated like an A-side fighter. And I was fighting him on the Arturo Gatti versus Mickey Ward 2 undercard. And I had actually been told by the doctor that I needed surgery on my knuckles. These scars on my right hand, on my knuckles, they're from that surgery. I had fought a fight October 13th, but November 23rd was scheduled Gotti Ward 2, and I was on that undercard. So after this fight October 13th, I see the doctor, and he's like, well, you need surgery. We're going to have to get surgery. I'm like, hell no, you're not. I'm not doing surgery right now. I'm scheduled to fight on the Arturo Gatti Mickey Ward card. I'm fighting on that card. Arturo was my favorite fighter growing up. I'm going to fight on this undercard. I don't care what anybody tells me. So I went in there with a hurt hand, and I certainly... I'm not going to say I underestimated the opponent, but I think the opponent could have been probably a little bit easier at that point in my career, especially with the injury that I was going into the fight with. And Delgado wound up becoming that kind of guy where he ended up excelling enough to where he ended up fighting for a world championship. So obviously he was no slouch. For me to be fighting him going into a fight with an injury was dumb of me and probably not so smart of my team that made the matchup. But I fought the fight. I won a split decision. I got booed out of the ring. I didn't look so great. And Delgado winds up upsetting a couple of guys after that. I think one of them was actually from Emmanuel Stewart's Kronk Gym. So this guy's talking for a year. We ended up talking trash to each other. And finally, we made the fight on the Vitaly Klitschko-Kirk Johnson undercard. And I had a good camp for this fight. And it was an 8-rounder again, just like the first time it was. I had a good camp for this fight, and it was a great card to be on. Vitaly Klitschko versus Kirk Johnson at Madison Square Garden. And 2 weeks before one of my last sparring sessions, I'm sparring against Santana, and Santana was a good puncher. I remember even in sparring, he was a good puncher, and he just didn't throw a lot. And a lot of the thing about a lot of heavy-handed guys is they don't throw a lot of punches because they have to set their feet in order to throw the shot. And unless they see a perfect opportunity to throw and land it, they won't throw. They'll keep their hands at home. You notice this with a lot of heavy punchers because they have to be sat and stable on their feet. And Santana was kind of like this. So a lot of times when I was spar Santana, he was good, but he wouldn't throw a lot of punches. So it would sort of make the work a little bit tedious. So, like an idiot, I said, you know what, I'm going to work on, because I always liked James Toney. I always enjoyed watching James Toney. I said, I'm going to start working on some James Toney stuff where I'm, chest to chest, which is actually what I did with Chris Fernandez after he hurt me. I figured, that chest to chest, closeness fight where you're touching me and I'll catch and shoot with little uppercuts and little touches. I figured, I always tried to practice that here and there because I always liked James Toney. Obviously, I could never do it anywhere near as good as James Toney, but I always thought it was an effective thing to have in your arsenal if you could get away with it against certain guys. Work on that catch and shoot on the inside and being close to one another. So I was working on it with Santana, and Santana throws a body shot, left hook to the body, and I go to catch it. I go to catch it to the elbow, and I come up with an uppercut. Which was like automatic for me. It was the catch and shoot that I like to practice the most, which is to catch the body shot and shoot an uppercut, because the shot that they're throwing the hook with is the side that they're supposed to be protecting their head with. So if they're throwing the hook, that side of their face is open. So automatically, I would catch the body shot and come up with an uppercut, and it was a very good move. The only thing is Santana did something even smarter than that. He threw the hook to the body, but he threw it in combination. He threw a hook to the body, overhand right. So it was bang, bang. So when I went to catch the hook and come with an uppercut, I actually came up into the overhand right. He hits me, and I go down. I remember I went down and went back. I got back up. I kind of like did a circle around the ring just to make sure my legs were there, and I touched gloves, and we kept sparring. A little bit embarrassing. We finished the sparring, and it was just funny because I was doing sit-ups after that, and one of my friends from the gym, Blimp was his name, was a trainer. I was doing some sit-ups, and another guy comes over. He just walked into the gym. He goes, "Oh, what's up, Paulie? How you been?" And Blimp was sitting right there, and he had seen the sparring. He goes, "Up and down." So we were laughing about it. But I remember thinking to myself, again, it's mental. It's the things the way you approach things. Are you going to let them break you, or are you going to let them frustrate you? I could have told myself, man, I'm fighting in 2 weeks in Madison Square Garden. Like how did I get myself dropped? I could have focused on that. But you know what I focused on instead? I focused on, I'm so sharp. I got myself dropped because I was working on something, and I that's all I told myself. And I was not, it didn't even bother me, man, honestly. It was a good shot. It was legitimately a knockdown. And I told him, and it was a good shot. I mean, like, I was like, whoa, because that's rare in sparring, you get hit like that. You take that kind of punch. I've been in a lot of gym wars and, not taking those shots. And I know every time people talk about sparring with me, they want to talk about Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor hits nowhere near as hard as everybody thinks he hits, and did no such damage to me at all. He's got one punch in his arsenal. He can't throw it in combination. There is nothing there that should make anybody fearful of Conor McGregor or his boxing. I think he's a very, very, very poor boxer, and I think even journeyman guys will beat him. But
do you have Jake Paul beating him?
I think Jake Paul has an overhand right that's dangerous, but I don't know if he's consistently going to be able to get away from the one punch McGregor has. McGregor has one punch. It's a left hand. I don't think it's that hard. I'm not going to say he's going to knock out Jake Paul with it, but it can land. I do think McGregor's sharpness on his left hand can make him land it consistently over and over again. And I don't see Jake Paul having the kind of defense that even will make him adjust to that.
What about the size difference?
The size difference, yeah, it could help. It could help. The size difference could help. I mean, listen, here's how you beat Conor. You just got to put Conor in a situation where he's uncomfortable. You don't necessarily have to hit him with one big shot. You just press him. And when you press him, you bring the bitch out of him. And it's a guarantee. It will come out of him. If you press him enough and you put him under enough duress, the bitch will come out of him. So that's really, and I just don't know that Paul has the consistency to do that. He might. But that's all you got to do. You just got to make Conor work when he doesn't want to work. That's how you beat a lot of guys, but they'll fight you back. Conor wants nothing to do with that kind of fight at all. As soon as you're putting him in that kind of fight, he's actually looking for a way out the door already. Like he's got no balls at all. So it's like, and I know that's like the expression, like everybody's like, oh, you say no, but he literally has no balls. Like when a guy, for me, that's the main character trait I look at in any fighter is like, how do they handle discomfort? anytime this guy gets put in discomfort, he's got no balls. I mean, he's looking for any way he can get out of the fight, and he finds it. Somehow he finds it, but he's looking for any way out of the fight. And it's a consistent trait that he'll never be able to get rid of because you're born with that. You're either born with balls, and I'm sorry, his parents had no balls too because that's where he got his genetics from. You either have that or you don't. You can't teach that. You can't tell somebody that. You can repeat that over and over again, but the way they will act when they're under duress is the way they're going to always act if they're under duress. You either have that character trait or you don't have that character trait. But nonetheless, so when it came to the sparring, going back to my best punches I took, Conor's not one of them at all. But Santana, that time it was another interesting one in the gym. That's probably the best shot I ever took in the gym was from Edgar Santana that dropped me. I've been dropped other times in the gym. I even knocked down some guys. There was actually a sparring session with Edelmiro Tiger Martinez was a lightweight contender where we dropped each other in this one sparring session. I mean, I got to tell you, there was 3 or 4 times where I got dropped and I dropped people in sparring in my whole career. That's it. And 2 of those times were in one sparring session. Me and Tiger dropped each other in the same sparring session. It was pretty wild, but it was one of those crazy gym wars in Gleason's gym, bro. I mean, it was just, I don't know, the wars you had in Gleason's and then years later in Wildcard Gym, those are some of the best punches you take or some of the best punches you see sometimes are given in these gyms, in these kind of gym wars, between 2 capable fighters and 2 top-level fighters, when you get, sometimes you'd have, sparring sessions between 2 top-level guys that, people should have probably been charged at the door to watch them, they're to be that good, But when you've got a competitive gym like that, it's really, really amazing. And I was fortunate enough in my career to be part of 2 gyms like that, Gleason's gym first and then Wildcard Gym later. And it was. I don't think I would have been the fighter I was, and I became without those experiences of training in places like that. So shout out to those 2 gyms as well. And that's kind of the story. I guess I give you a couple of backstories today. With the best punches I took in my career, and the rivalry I had with Jimenez. It's a rivalry that I always look back on fondly now because his experience was something that I needed to go through. I needed to experience his experience. And despite him having so much more experience than me, the fact that I was against his experience all the time made me a better fighter. And I sort of, to show my age, because I don't think a lot of you guys out there might know what a fast forward button is. It kind of hit the fast forward button on my progression in my career because I had experiences like this with Darling. I would lose a final and again against him, and I'd be so frustrated, go home so pissed, not sleep that night, and just be like, you know what? I'm going back to the gym Monday. I'm going to get ready for the next tournament, and I'm going to kick this guy's ass the next tournament, and it was always a motivating factor. But in focusing on him, what I didn't realize was I was actually bettering my entire boxing style, and it was actually getting me ready for all of boxing, where one day I would, take on the world and win world championships. Jimenez, you might be wondering what ended up happening in his pro career. Darling didn't have the best work ethic, and I think he grew out of love with boxing a lot faster than certain people. He had a father who really was well off, did very well, had some businesses, and I think Darling kind of just, was a little bit, had a little bit of a spoiled mindset. The father always was hard on him, but sometimes you can't force your kid too much, otherwise, they don't want to do it. I don't know, I thought, it's funny. It was funny because for me, I didn't have anybody pushing me. I had people helping me out. My grandfather was a big motivator. I had a couple of sponsors in my neighborhood that were big motivators as well, but they weren't hard on me. Like, it wasn't like, they wanted me to stay out of the street. They wanted me to do the right thing. But if I stopped boxing the next day, like, they wouldn't have been like, oh, what are you doing? Like, they just been like, all right, do the right thing and don't get yourself into trouble then, It's just, for me, I just fell in love with it. But I felt like Darling never had the enthusiasm and passion for boxing that I had. And eventually that does catch up to you. He ended up, as a professional, he got an HBO fight. I think he fought Yuriorkis Gamboa for a world title, or maybe even before Gamboa fought the title, but they were on HBO. He actually dropped Yuriorkis Gamboa in round 1, but then Gamboa kind of beat him every round and, beat him on points. And that's as far as Darling got. He got to HBO boxing at a dark level, but didn't win. Obviously, the experiences I went through with him, though, allowed me to keep progressing and become the world champion that I became in my career and have the progression that I had in my career. But good experiences, bad experiences, I'm thankful for all of them because they gave me the character and they gave me the fine mental training and physical training to achieve what I achieved in my career. And now I have, these platforms that I'm doing like Paulie TV and commentating with Fight Stars and Pro Box and even BYB Bare Knuckle. And in the past, I've done stuff with Showtime. Without a professional boxing career that had been so successful, I would not have been noticed in order to have these commentating jobs. So, I'm glad in myself for all the experiences I had in boxing, because even the bad ones, even the tough ones, they allowed me to get stronger, build a stronger mindset, find out who I really was, reveal my character, and allow me to have that inner pride to, excel at what I needed to excel at. And because of that, I've been able to, transcend and experience other things within boxing, even after my boxing career. So I owe everything to boxing, man, and yeah, that's why I freely talk about all my experiences, both the good ones and the bad ones, and I'm unashamed to do it. And I don't need to lie about them. If I went through something bad, I'll tell you. If I went through something good, I'll tell you. You don't need one thing you know to know about me, man. If I don't have to lie about it, because I'll tell you. As you just saw, I've just expressed some of the worst punches I took, how they made me feel, freely like an open book. So if it didn't happen, guys, then I'm going to tell you it didn't happen. Conor McGregor did not happen.
Release the footage, Dan.
At all. No, I'm not even going to ask them to release the footage. They burned it already. But but that's my bottom line with that. And thank you for watching Paulie TV. Like, comment, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this bit of a storytelling session. And I'll see you next time. This is Paulie Malignaggi for Paulie TV.